now.
I'll start over then. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:02 p.m. on September 16, 2021. This is Chair Rich Landsberg. I'd like to call the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency meeting to order. And Madam Secretary, if we can please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Rich Landsberg,
I'm present.
Vice Chair Josh Chapman.
Here.
Director Tom Stallard,
Present.
Director Will Arnold, absent. And then Director Angel Barajas
Present.
and UC Davis Representative Camille Kirk.
Present.
Thank you. Rich, Tom.
Thank you, Michelle. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum with 3 members, 3 voting members, that is, and our other participating agencies are present. This time, I'd like for other participants on this Zoom to please identify yourself and the agency you represent.
Hi, I'm Tim Bush. I'm the general manager of the agency.
Stan Grichko, operations manager for the agency.
Dick Shanahan, Agency General Counsel.
Mike Fan, utility, the UC Davis.
Yeah, McKinney, treasurer of the agency.
Do one more, Lindsay Smith.
Lindsay Smith, West Yost Associates, program manager on behalf of Woodland Davis.
Great. Thank you, everyone. That takes us then to the approval of the agenda. Madam Secretary, is there any public comment regarding the agenda?
There has been none received.
Thank you. Can we get a motion then to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Stallard, is there a second?
Second, Chapman.
Thank you. Michelle, roll call, please.
Chair Rich Landsberg,
Yes.
Vice Chair Josh Chapman,
Aye.
Director Tom Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
We now go to public comment. And Madam Secretary, have you received any comments from the public in any form for this portion of our meeting today?
No public comment has been received in any form.
Is there any callers on standby or any hands raised?
We do have one hand raised from a phone number.
That's Jeremy.
Is that Jeremy?
Yep.
Let's see here.
He
Is
needs to
Jeremy your
unmute.
participant?
Yeah, I can't quite see. There we go.
Sorry,
Jeremy,
guys.
are you there?
Yeah, sorry, guys. Didn't mean to do that.
No, no worries. No worries.
All right, well, thank you. Since there are none, we can then move to the next item, which is agency business. And the first item is the consent calendar. Does any member of the board wish to pull or discuss an item on our consent calendar this afternoon?
Stallard moves approval.
Oh, let me do this first. Is there any public comment regarding the consent calendar, Michelle?
None.
Thank you. Stallard moves. Is there a second?
Second, Chapman.
Second by Chapman. Madam Secretary, voice vote, please.
Chair Rich Landsberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Josh Chapman,
Aye.
Director Tom Stallard.
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle. We now go to item 2 on the agenda, which is the general manager's update and operations update. I take it that's going to be Tim and Stan, is that right?
Yeah, and we also have a special guest speaker for one of the items today.
Let's proceed then.
Okay, next slide, please. 6 real topics for today. Talk about property tax appeal. We actually have a good update for that. Dick will take care of that for us. And then look at water supply outlook going forward. And then operations update, how things are going with our coagulant conversion that we did start last week. And an update on the 5-year third-party inspections that we did a few months ago. And then where we are with our capital improvement projects. With that, I will turn it over to Dick for an update on the property tax appeal.
Thank you, Tim. Just a brief recap for the directors. As you'll probably recall, in 2016, the agency bought some water rights from Conway Ranch. That resulted in a substantial property tax liability to the County of Yolo to the tune of almost $200,000 per year. We've been objecting to that tax assessment since then. We entered into a settlement agreement with the County of Yolo in 2020. And that settlement involved the addition of the County of Yolo as a party to the Joint Powers Authority. That change has been made, and the county is now a member of the JPA. There were two parts to the settlement. There was a moving forward part, which has been in place for some time now, and that is the water rights are no longer taxable because the intake is now within the boundaries of the JPA. The second part was the looking backward refund part. And since the 2020 agreement, we've been working on implementing a resolution on the refund side that required approval of a joint stipulation by the, I'll pause while that motorcycle passes by the State Board of Equalization. And because of staffing changes and hiccups at the BOE and COVID, that has been very much delayed. But I'm pleased to report that yesterday we received a decision from the BOE that supports the settlement and supports the zero valuation for the 4 fiscal years since 2016-17. And that will result in the next step in the settlement, and that is the issuance of a refund to the agency, and that refund's in progress and should be issued in coming weeks or a month or two, I suspect, to the tune of about almost or just in excess of $750,000. So that's good news for the agency, and that should complete the settlement that we've been working on for many years. And congratulations to the agency on accomplishing that. Any questions?
Good job.
Nice to be having it done.
Agreed.
Is okay. Next slide. So now for the less optimistic news. It seems to be the year for water supply issues. So our water supply update. This is the term 91 graph. Kind of want to start out that the water year, the way the state and federal government look at it, the water year starts on October 1 of every year. So the left side of the graph is October 1, the right side is October 31. So this is the current water year. So it started October 1 last year, ends in 2 weeks from now. What the heavy dark line on top is the daily water supply from Sacramento in through the Sacramento River system, really through the Delta. And so it's basically an aggregation of whether or not the state and federal governments are adding supplemental flows into the system to keep everything going and keep the Delta fresh. When it is in the salmon colored zone, they're releasing supplemental water and the term 91 curtailment is in effect. When it's in the blue, there's natural flow, there's not a need for term 91. So what this shows is on the far right side of the screen is last year, the term 91 curtailment ended on September 28th of 2020. They also, the grayed out or the lighted color in the background is last year's, darker color is this year's. So they do provide a year-over-year snapshot. So the curtailment did end last year, September 28th, but then it was reimposed, the purple line on the left, on October 9th. So it only ended for about 2 weeks. It did not start raining in the northern part of the state, so the curtailment was reimposed. That then continued to the green line, which was December 24th. So last year, curtailment ended for a few weeks in September, October, was reinstated, continued until December 24th. The curtailment was then reinstated April 29th of this year and continues through this day. As you can see from the heavier dark line, the flows are decreasing in the river. They're getting closer to the non-term 91 territory. And that's mainly because of irrigation season ending. There's just less demand on the system. Expectation this year is that the curtailment will not end. And I'll talk about reservoirs in a second, but really we participated in a dry year task force group, kind of a group of water agencies, state and federal officials, NOAA, fisheries, all kinds of people came together for kind of a working group throughout these summer months. And in those meetings, the state has said that they will keep the turn 91 and other curtailments going until there's at least a number of decent sized storms this fall in the winter months, because they're really concerned with ending their curtailment. Say we get one decent storm and then everybody starts using water and they have to reimpose it. And then we end up not getting storage in the big reservoirs. So they are quite likely and quite comfortable to keep the curtailment going well past October 31 this year, unless we start seeing real rain. I think it's a bit encouraging that we got some rain last week and there's some more in the forecast for Sunday. So hopefully the storms just keep getting bigger and we do get real rain in October this year. And that's kind of what we really need for the curtailment to not continue. If it ends up being a dry year this winter, the state has said that they would let the curtailment go all winter long potentially, or turn it on and off a few times throughout the winter. In the event we get a dry spell, they may reimpose the curtailment if it had ended earlier. So it's kind of a different animal this year, far more strict than what we're used to over the past 5 years in terms of ability to divert water in winter months. Now, kind of on the next two slides, I'll kind of show a little bit why. This is Lake Shasta. These are graphs you've seen before, so kind of just a real quick refresh on it. The top of the shaded area is the average Lake Shasta level over the past several years. The lighter green and blue on top are wet year levels, and the red on the bottom is the 1977 drought. That's kind of been the drought record. And the darker blue line is the daily storage in Lake Shasta. Same thing, water year starts October 1, so October 1, everything will get reset. Shasta today is at about 25% capacity. It's about 1.1 million acre feet with a total capacity of 4.5 million. Next slide, please. Lake Oroville is a little bit worse. The same rules apply as the top of the shaded area is the average. The two top lines, green and blue, are wet years, and then the red is the 1977 drought. This year, Oroville is currently at about 22% capacity and is a bit below the 1977 drought. So because the storage levels will be starting off the water year so low, I'm way below historical average. The projects will want to refill the reservoirs preferentially over ending their curtailments. That's not to say the curtailments will continue. We don't know that yet. I just think in terms of risk, it's a much higher risk than we've had in the past. But even just looking at last year, the curtailment continued until December 24th. So where do we go from here? Next slide, please. Kind of talked about that this year is a dry year. It is also a Shasta critical year. We are continuing to use our CVP, our project water, and the Nature Conservancy water supply that we bought in July, or rather in June, through October 31. So that water supply is stable through the end of October. I think that this year there is a very high risk of the curtailment continuing past October 31, and maybe for quite some time, maybe even more so than last year. It all depends on rain season. We are working on several options for water supply after November 1, assuming that the curtailment continues in a couple different ways. We had gotten several maybes. One of them did drop out. We had been buying from West Sacramento the last 3 years. They are unable to work with us this year. They do not have the water to sell to us this year. So they're off the table. That just happened a few days ago, but there are a couple others that do have water supply that could be made available to us. Whether or not that can happen will depend on reclamation giving their consent. Both of these two that we're working with do involve a difference in accounting with respect to past practices and how we use water. So we will need reclamation to agree to this water use. But we think we have a good chance because we are a municipal water agency. We do have real problems if we shut down for any real amount of time. And Stan will get into that in a few minutes. So we're working on keeping the plant running. And that way, the other thing we're looking at as well is in the event those fall through or can't happen, we're working on 2 other alternatives to at least provide the minimum amount of flow to the agency to keep our water treatment plant alive. And Stan will get into this in a few minutes, but there are some challenges if we have to shut down for more than just a few days. Our minimum plant operational capacity is 7 million gallons per day. The pumps and chemical feed pumps just aren't sized to treat lower than that rate. And just for kind of where we are at that time of year, the cities use roughly 10 to 12 million gallons per day. So we could run the plant at 7 MGD. That's about half, a little over half of our actual need. But we do have the ability to actually run the plant slower than that if we shut it down at night. We could run the plant during the day to run at 7 MGD rate throughout the day, turn it off at night and provide the partners roughly 2 million gallons a day would be kind of the minimum option that we would try to do just to keep the plant alive to prevent other problems. So we're kind of looking at all the above approach. It is a tough year buying water this year, mainly because the reservoirs are so low and there's a lot of pressure from environmental groups and just different things and any transfers going on this year. So it's a tough year, but I'm optimistic that we will be able to get something to the board in the next few weeks. Any questions on that?
Tim, did you say that, have we already used up the Nature Conservancy water from Mill Creek?
No, we're using that. We're using it at 1.29 million gallons per day. They have a flow-based supply, so we're using it at that rate through October 31.
And not after October 31?
Yeah, our current contract with them was through October 31, and we would need an additional contract to continue past that time.
And can we legally do that with them? I mean, I know there was some question about DWR's point of view.
Yes, yeah, we are working with them on that, and we're actually meeting with them again on Tuesday to discuss next steps.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. So as Tim mentioned, well, he didn't mention this was a different one, but we're looking at around 10 million gallons a day right now. We split that half to half. Woodland's at 5, Davis UCD is at 5. UCD is getting a little under 500,000 a day, I believe, of that flow. Not on a regular basis. They are shutting their pump station off and on to accommodate that low amount of flow. And then we do plan on an increase next week, provided we have approval from the state to do so. And then another increase on 10/6, and I'll go into why those increases would go into effect here in the next slide. We still continue to meet all of our contractual obligations and drinking water requirements. And as always, the reports are posted on the website. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, and it's on this slide as well, the plant did switch to aluminum sulfate as its primary coagulant from ferric chloride. We did discuss that previously. That happened on September 8th. We've been working with the State Water Board Division of Drinking Water to enact that change, primarily because we anticipate a shortage of ferric chloride, and that could last up to 9 months. There's just a supply issue. There's raw materials that go into that process that the vendors just cannot procure. So we switched to essentially alum for this period. As part of the agreement with the state, we needed to lower our flows. That's why we're at 10, going out to the partners right now, which equates to roughly 11 coming into the plant being diverted. We have not yet seen any of the actual data from the plant or from the cities or UCD. I did see Davis's today. It came through today, but we have additional sampling that we're doing. And then barring any unforeseen issues with the results from those samples, we would go up to roughly 13.5 there at September 22nd, and then 16 on October 6th. But I will say we did, and Brian, who is our project manager with Jacobs, did just send the first week's information over to the state. And as part of that email, did request consideration to actually go increase the flows earlier than September 22nd. So if they get back from that on a positive note, we may look to increase our flows. And again, these flows are all through October 31st. We do have water supply that we could increase up to this point. There would be no restrictions. And in essence, this lower level that we've been sending to the partners has banked a little bit of our water supply. So when we get into October, we actually could increase to a pretty decent level for up till the 31st. So that's one small positive of having to switch to alum. But as mentioned, the plant's running really well. Actually, in a couple different ways, the filter runs and the time they have to backwash when they're dirty has been extended actually with the switch to aluminum sulfate. So actually the plant looks like it's doing really well with this coagulant. So next slide. And then this slide here speaks more to what happens on November 1. You know, if we get to November 1, and as Tim mentioned, we are actively searching with a number of different agencies to see if we can secure some additional water supply, water rights. If that does not occur and Term 91 is still in effect, in essence, we would have to mothball the plant and shut it down. And what that would mean is roughly 85% of those costs are fixed, meaning we're paying those bills, the agency's paying those bills, the partners are paying those bills, regardless of whether the plant's producing water. The variable costs, electricity and chemicals, obviously we wouldn't see those. Those are pass-throughs and they would be reduced. But a large number of the costs that we pay would be continued to be paid. Jacobs, I would say is during that time, if that were to occur, obviously there's a lot of preventive maintenance. Jacobs would not be idle for that period of time. There's a lot of preventive maintenance and other things that they could be performing. So we would be still maintaining the plant, if you will. It's just obviously not producing is not enviable for any of the partners. And then obviously any prolonged shutdown, you know, we can't just turn the plant off and on after a few days or weeks. You know, we have an 8-mile transmission main down to Davis. We, in essence, would have to flush that again if that water was to stay in there for a couple of weeks or longer, because we'd have to ensure that it meets drinking water quality and has those, it has a chlorine residual as well. So there's some significant challenges to starting the plant back up. So it's not like when Term 91 ends, we could the next day be delivering water to the partners. That would take some time. So next slide. We did conduct, and we mentioned this before at a previous board meeting, we did engage with a third party to have basically a 5-year annual inspection. This would be the first one of the agency. It's an agency review of the operation of the facility and how it's being maintained and the records that are being kept. We do have the draft report that Lindsay and myself are reviewing. I will say, as noted on here, the results were positive. There were a few items mentioned of a safety nature or a little more immediate concerns that we've already addressed. Frankly, they were addressed while they were here. And then the majority of the other recommendations are about best practices for the industry and changes we might look to enact there. So all in all, really good report. Jacobs is doing, it confirmed Jacobs is doing a really good job of maintaining the facility. Next slide. Some capital improvements completed. I'm not sure if we mentioned this at a previous meeting. We certainly mentioned that we had to adjust and modify the jib crane that removes our fish screens. That was done successfully. You can see this is the last screen actually that was being pulled out. That was the one that we could not previously remove. It was able to be removed with the modification. So Jacobs now has access to all 10 of the fish screens to be cleaned. So that was good. Next slide. Also, Conway Preservation Group at our cost did replace an irrigation culvert over to the east of the Woodland wastewater plant. Once we had installed our transmission main down that stretch, it created a seepage issue into those fields there. So we after some sleuthing over a couple of years, we identified that this culvert was basically seeping into our transmission main trench, and then that was creating the issue. So we went ahead and replaced that prior to the irrigation season this year. So that's done. Next slide. And then we do still have some other capital improvements that are still on the books to get done. The erosion control project that we talked about, RD 2035 is attempting to get a contractor on board for that. And then we do have some roof access safety improvements that we previously mentioned. And then also we need to replace and realign the screen cleaner wire and also provide a safe method of accessing those bearings on that screen cleaner. And we're working on those now as well. And I think that, next slide, I think that might be it. Yep, that's it.
Just a question.
Sure.
You know, this was a design, build, operate contract. You know, I mean, things that are not functional, well, that was part of the design, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the intake was, the intake itself was design bid build. And it was not managed by the agency.
So in other words, Jacobs takes no responsibility for deficiencies at the pump house.
Yeah, they had no part of that project. They're the maintaining agency now, organization now, but they had no part of design or construction.
Thank you.
But I would add to that, one thing is, you know, in some of the other areas that we have recognized, like the pump failures, the early failures and stuff, Jacobs actually did partner with the agency in funding some of those repairs. So while the contract calls for no responsibility from them on some of these design issues, they have in the past assisted the agency with getting those corrected.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to hear.
Yep.
Any other questions for Stan or for Tim? Angel, do you have any questions? Okay.
No questions.
How about UCD? Did we lose her? Oh,
No
Camille.
questions.
Great. All right. Michelle, are there any public comments on item number 2?
No public comment received on item number 2.
Great. That'll take us then to item number 3, which is a letter of interest to participate in the Sites Reservoir project. I hope that everybody got a copy of the letter that was sent out by Tim and his staff. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so this is just an option that we've been kind of following over several years now, is because we do have this known problem with water supply, particularly November, December of every year. And we are looking for a long-term solution to that problem. So one of the options that could come up is joining Sites Reservoir. And at this point, we've had a couple of meetings with Sites Reservoir, traded information with them a bit. What they're doing right now is they are getting ready to do what they call a rebalancing. Right now, basically all of the storage within Sites Reservoir is allocated to their existing partners. But at about the end of this year, they're going to ask their partners, is that still the right fit? So some of these partners are expected to drop some of their water allocation, which would then make it available for new people to join. So the only request for the board right now, or the consideration for the board right now, is should we send a letter of interest to Sites Reservoir that if they have some allocation available to us, that they could make some available to us. There's no obligations at this point, but I would say that there are some costs to this and some risks, right? The reservoir itself is not yet constructed. They are going through the EIR process right now, working through several issues at this time. So they are actively engaged in moving forward, but they are expected to start construction, I think 2025 and complete around 2029 at some point. So it is a few years out. And there is also some cost. If we were to join Sites Reservoir project, we would essentially have to pay for some of the past work that's been done. The cost of that is somewhere around $450 an acre foot. And then I think there are some costs between and that would get us through 2024. There are some additional costs from 2025 to 2029 that we haven't quite yet quantified yet what the impacts might be. But then after we would start taking delivery of water in 2030, it would be roughly $750 an acre foot going forward. So it's not inexpensive water. There would be a fair amount of costs up front that we would have to pay somewhat speculatively because the reservoir has not yet been constructed, and then it would be an ongoing relatively high acre foot cost going forward. But the benefit of that is though that it's a secured, guaranteed water supply. The way that they're structuring the reservoir allocation is that, say for example, we were to acquire 2,000 acre feet of guaranteed supply, that would give us 12,000 acre feet of storage in the reservoir, which means that we could take our 2,000 acre feet every year, say for 6 years before we ran out, before it had to be refilled. But it is a bit like a savings account. Once you use the water, you have to refill it before it can be used again. So it is designed for multiple dry years and multiple wet years of filling. So it's, I think, not a bad approach. And the way I kind of look at it a little bit is how many people 20 years down the road said they wish they would not have acquired water rights back at that time. At this point, it's just a request to send a letter of interest to the Sites Reservoir Authority. We may or may not be invited to continue with them. It depends on how much they have available and how many other people are interested. I think what we would do between now and the end of the year is really do a deep dive into cost benefit analysis and prepare an issue paper on this. And does this make sense for the agency to participate? Because we would be taking some risk. We would be spending, assuming we got 2,000 acre feet, we would be spending roughly $900,000 early next year. And then some additional money a few years out before, well ahead of actually receiving water. So we'd have to make sure that this is really the best option for the agency with respect to other options. But we have found out that, this year in particular, it's difficult. I think we've been very lucky that we've been able to work with West Sacramento and a few others over the past few years, but this year's a bit more of a challenge. And that could be the case with other long-term droughts that we get into after this one. I kind of went over that kind of quickly. Can take any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Tim on this? Just a quick question. I think you said it before, Tim, and that is, this letter of interest is being solicited?
No, we actually approached them.
Okay.
It's kind of part of our look at all options approach to securing our water supply in winter months.
All right.
It would also be, the other thing I should add is that we could also use it in summer months. And so we could use it to supplement supply in summer or reserve it to winter or do both in the same year. We would also have the ability to sell the water to other people.
That's right. That was my question.
Yeah, so we could actually sell the water and basically make it cost neutral for us.
Who would you be able to sell it to, Tim? Could you be able to sell it to some of the rural residents or companies in the rural areas or small towns?
We would only be able to sell that to people who divert water from the Sacramento River. Or that are within the project itself that are not necessarily on the river.
Okay.
Because mainly it would have to be able to be diverted from people who are connected to the project or the river itself in some way.
Thank you.
Basically the same restrictions that we have when we want to buy water. We have the same rules.
Thank you, Tim. It doesn't seem like it would hurt to send a letter of interest out to the agency.
We need a motion on this or just a consensus of the board?
Dick, should we do a motion?
I'll move the action.
Yeah, I recommend a motion.
Thank you.
I move that we send the letter seeking expression of interest.
Stellard moves there, second.
Second by Chapman.
Second by Chapman. Michelle, a voice vote, please.
Yes, Chair Rich Landsberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Josh Chapman,
Aye.
Director Tom Stallard.
Aye.
And I forgot to ask any public comment on that. Dick's
None.
probably catch me on that. We have
No
anything
public
on it?
comment.
Okay,
No,
thank
sir.
you. Great. Let's now go to item number 4, which is our long range calendar.
Long range calendar, we don't have much officially until our next board meeting, which is in January 20th. I would like to add, though, that you may get a somewhat frantic phone call or email from Michelle in the next few weeks, trying to set up a special board meeting, assuming that we can line up some agreements for water purchase. There are some very promising options available to us, but because October 31 is only 6 weeks away from that, we will have to move very quickly on them. The two that will require reclamations consent, I'm pretty sure that if as soon as we have reclamations consent, we will schedule the meeting for approval of an agreement
All right.
or consideration of agreement, I should say. But we will try to get, we do need to get whatever work we have to do on these things completed prior to October 31.
Just let us know.
Hmm?
I have a question for Josh. You know whether or not Davis is moving towards in-person meetings in January or sometime soon?
We were originally hoping to get back, around this time. Then obviously the governor's, current executive order ends the end of September. So we're currently just waiting to see what that current legislation on his desk now that, moves the ability for the online forum through 2023. But we haven't had any further discussions at the city level in-person meetings. We were waiting for the announcement after the recall vote to see where they want to go with the September timeline.
We'll just hold off then, everybody make a decision about going in person in January. We'll just hold off until we hear back. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can follow up on that too, and reach out to you or whoever and have a discussion about that as well.
All right. Any other comments on the long-range calendar? Seeing none, thank you. We can now go to item number 5, board member comments. Is there a board member that has a comment, or maybe a member of the participating agencies that wish to add a comment? Everybody's quiet today. That's a good sign, I guess. All right, that takes us to item number 6, which is the good part, the adjournment, right? We are scheduled to go to Davis in January. It could be by teleconference. We'll have to wait and see.
The agenda does have today's date as the next scheduled meeting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No,
I'm looking at adjournment,
Oh.
next regular board meeting. You meant to have January.
on the slide, yes, it does. You're right. My apologies.
No worries.
You knew what you were thinking. All right, in that case, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Fine.
Did we stop recording?